So Alan. Bill.
Wait a minute.
Everyone has a silent button up here.
Yeah. You just hit the, get it, Phil.
Oh, whatever. Oh, there it is. Just click it down.
You're in one of them golf clubs.
Okay, so in 2016, Summit Entertainment released a movie called Deepwater Horizon. Now, whether you've seen the movie or not, working in the oil and gas industry, we're all well aware that this movie was based on actual events. And it's been 10 years since this happened. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, it is hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah. So I'm going to inform you today about the actual BP Deepwater Horizon disaster. And I remember when this happened, I've done tons of research on it and gathered a lot of information. We're going to cover the event, the immediate aftermath, and where we're at 10 years later. So on April 20th, 2010, the crew was set to leave the Mackinac discovery well, and they had capped off the well and they were getting ready to move the rig. And the discovery well is located about 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana. So they were getting ready to leave. It was about 10 o'clock at night. And the well that was capped, flawed. It was a flawed plan, and there was a surge of natural gas, mud, and seawater that kind of blew up, okay? And it caused the rig to explode. It was engulfed in flames. So Arthur Berman on the oildrum.com basically said that there just wasn't enough cement that was used to cap the well off. And Justin Mullins followed that up with multiple failures that happened. There was, at first, the inadequate cement. They just didn't use enough of it. There were multiple valve failures at the bottom of the pipe and the blowout preventer, which sits on the ocean floor at the top of the well borehole. It had a switch that failed, and the battery backup didn't work. It was dead. There were various pressure tests that were completed by the crew, and they were misinterpreted. So they didn't realize that it was even leaking. There's a separator that, with all that gas and oil or water coming up, there's a separator device that is used that flushes that overboard. Well, they used the wrong device. They used a smaller one, and it became overwhelmed, which caused the natural gas to start to fill up the rig. Now, there were no gas alarms on the rig that were working, so the gas detection system failed, which caused the ventilation fans to stay open. So what it would have done is it would have closed those fans to keep the natural gas from going to the parts of the rig that could ignite it, and that also failed. So there were 126 employees on board. 11 of them died instantly, have never been found. 17 others were injured, and the rest were picked up and rescued. Now, 2 days after, on April 22nd, the rig sank. And when it did that, it broke the pipe off at the well. And at that point, oil just started to flow uninterrupted into the Gulf at about 60,000 barrels per day. It stayed like that for 87 days. It stayed like that. So the EPA estimates that in total, it was roughly 4 million barrels that flowed into the Gulf, and that comes out to be about 200 million gallons of oil that went into the water. So the shoreline was about 1,300 miles of shoreline the oil kind of went to, and they figured with the satellite imagery, it calculated an affected area about 57,000 square miles. So wildlife was just, it was absolutely devastating. Within the first 55 days, and this is just an example of what one group was discovering, 55 days, they had 725 dead birds, 325 turtles that they found. This doesn't even begin to touch what was dying out in the ocean. Fish, crustaceans, shrimp, coral. I mean, it just was overwhelming. At a year, this is what this group had determined, that they had 6,147 dead birds. The dolphin population is still just wiped out. I mean, it decimated half of the dolphin population. So as far as the economy went immediately after, there were, and I hate to say positive effects, but for companies such as our own and cleanup crews and chemical suppliers, they unfortunately, they profited off of this outside and around the Gulf Coast area. The Gulf Coast itself, however, they were hit hard. So fishing, tourism, I mean, all of it, it just affected everybody and everything along the Gulf Coast. Fishermen reported an 80% drop in catches. Before the spill, they were catching 4,000 pounds of brown shrimp in 4 days. They catch 800 pounds in a week after that. So it was the second worst oil spill in the world and the largest accidental U.S. spill in history. And when the oil sank, let's take a look at where the oil went, okay? So about 17% was recovered from the wellhead, and 10 to 20% was chemically dispersed. But they used a lot of chemicals, which kind of made it even more of a toxic situation, mixing all that stuff together. They only really skimmed about 4% off the surface, and they burned another 6%. So 20 to 25% did eventually evaporate, and 12 to 13% naturally dispersed, and about 5% ended up down in the ocean floor. But there's still anywhere from 11 to 25% that's just unaccounted for. They don't know where it went. And they're still finding oil in some of the marshlands. So a study in Scientific Reports said that between 2011 and 2018, they pulled 2,500 fish out of the Gulf. There were 91 different species and 359 different locations, and all of them still had oil contamination in them. All of them did. And that was as late as 2018 when that was published. So cleanup kind of boosted the economy a little bit over the last 10 years. JP Morgan Chase said that BP has basically spent over $63 billion in this. And that's legal fees, that's paying people to clean it up, they spent money to revive the tourist industry and to help the fishermen and all this stuff. So the fishing industry is recovering and has recovered well, but there's still really a stigma around it. People don't want to eat fish from the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, and the study that they did earlier, honestly, myself, I feel the same way. But it is recovering, so the economy is doing better. So I have a couple of statements that I'd like to make before I close things off. And we covered the event today, the explosion and what caused it. We went over the immediate aftermath and where we're at 10 years later. So the Gulf spill happened over a decade ago, but it's just still very much an issue today, and it could happen again. But I hope by reviewing this and by going over everything, we learned that, safety and precaution are very important things. And we just want to make sure that we go home every day the same way that we came in. Okay? Thank you. I really appreciate you guys listening. And that's all I have.
So you don't get in trouble.
Everybody's still here.